Creation of Mogus. I have Brunhild, and now I'm just trying to think of like what else sounds fun. Right, yeah. Add him to the game. Oh. Well, it depends on the turn. No, no, like there was so actually no, he only had one zealous. Never mind, because I ended up killing the dark zealous. Okay, never mind. Well, no, because I was gonna say there was a turn where he got to play. Well, now I'm wondering. It also might have been that I just like had so much pressure on board anyways that like him tapping out like legitimately just didn't matter. And then I was able to put in play Genshi Tensen and then just like deal 4,000 damage in like one turn. Okay. But yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome back after a long week of Force the Will to the Teacher's Lounge, your favorite ever live Force the Will podcast featuring myself, Jeremy Franklin, and I am joined tonight by Derrick Muguneta, not a
How's it
ghost.
going, guys?
And we will be joined later by Ryan Miles, but he's currently playing Hearthstone, so he needs to finish his game and get on. We just don't have to deal with him like screaming in the microphone for the intro, so he'll be disappointed. So as always, thank you guys so much for being here. We are sponsored by Odyssey Games, so huge thanks to them. You can go ahead and check them out. There's links in the description below for sealed product as well as singles, especially of the new set, Alice Origins. And they still have some DBV left, though you're not going to see any Dark Alices or anything like that. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. And always, if you appreciate what we're doing here on the on the channel, you can go ahead and consider clicking that join button down below. It is the easiest way for you to support the channel outside of just watching. You can become a member of the alumni and give a monthly pledge, which goes to support the channel by helping us buy better equipment, get to events, and all kinds of stuff like that. And you get lots of cool perks like that badge next to your name, these emojis like Derrick is spamming in the chat. Appreciate it, bro. The more members we get, the more emojis we get to have access to. So please consider doing that. I know the people who do the artwork for the chibi artwork for the Valhalla rulers, so I'm really hoping we can get some new memberships in soon so I can start making some dope Valhalla emotes.
We need more emojis.
We do need more emojis. But tonight we are talking about getting cold feet at the altar, feeling left at the altar, and you'll kind of I'll explain that in a little bit. So as we were walking into this meta, as we were seeing the spoilers, there were a lot of cards that we were like, oh, this is going to be insane. Why are they thinking about reprinting this? This is going to break the format. This is going to do this. This is going to do this. Everything's awful. Everything's awful. I like to call it the Rachel complex, which is the same idea that everybody had when 3-drop Rachel was spoiled. Once again, just like as it is with Rachel, I think we can fairly certainly say that those cards have not done what we think we were going to do. This weekend, we both played in Vite Ramen tournaments. I played in Chicago, and you played...
I played in Minnesota at the Games Geek.
Games Geek, and we both won. So high five for us.
Yeah.
And so I kind of would like to talk a little bit about talk a little bit about the decks that we played, but then how those deck choices might have been influenced by our recognizing that we didn't need to be playing some of these cards that some people were like overhyping. So Derrick, I'll let you go ahead and go first.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I was playing what I call Esper Brunhild. Even though it was playing like some off-color cards, I was playing Satan, Fiery Angels of Fiery Vengeance, things like that. And I even had some Athenia in the sideboard. So like technically it was 5-color, but I just called it Esper Brunhild just for the sake of
right.
The deck itself felt pretty good. The reason that I decided to go with this was at first it started off with kind of like a joke, just like, after the crazy meta that we had at Worlds and all that, I kind of wanted to go back to, playing Forest Emma, because that's if you've known me for a while, you know that's my thing.
My catchphrase for Derrick is if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it looks like a duck, it's probably a stemma.
Yeah. Yeah, but Forest Emma, I preached by it like in the previous seasons, and like after with the meta that we had at Worlds, it just wasn't as viable as an option. And then like after like everything rotated, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna build a deck with Forest Emmas and just like try it out. And then tried it out at locals, and it went actually better than expected. So I was like, all right, hold up, is this actually a deck? And then so after fine-tuning it a little bit and things like that, I like came up with this idea that it's like, all right, what if we just like find like what's going to be like the most popular decks and kind of like target what they're going for. So like with ISIS, they have their Nyarlathotep and actual ISIS Resonator and trying to kill you with like dealing 5,000 damage or just like aggroing you out. And so with that, like the best thing in my mind was Fiery Angel of Fiery Vengeance, which is basically just a for quote unquote free, like paying 0 mana, pay 2 life and kill a Nyarlathotep. And so like that felt good for that. And then not to mention Blade of Faith being a strong removal card as it is, 1 mana RFG something, which I came to find might not be as good as I once thought. But I'll get back to
and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. And then I still like the idea of Alter and Layla things. I do believe we wanted to cover in this podcast whether or not like Alter decks, whether they're still viable or not. Was that going to be this one? Or
Yeah, a little bit about how
okay.
just like alter with some of the stuff that's been printed is not as insane as people thought it was going
to
be.
Right.
Because
so,
yeah, we'll talk about that.
All right, sure. But with my strategy, I wasn't doing what I used to do. If many of you who are watching probably know, I was the one that played Alter Brunhild at Pennsylvania GP, and that's what I would consider to be an Alter deck. Kind of instead of just like using the utility of Layla and Alter to get stones, and then eventually just
Ride
get up to
there he is.
Get to your big 5 drops and dropping Athenians on everybody. That's more of what I would consider to be an Alter deck. Right. Whereas the deck that I played, I would consider to be a control deck that played Alter.
Yes,
whereas I was using it to mainly like sack off a Layla here. I would use it. I'd even use it like banish it with 1 counter just to get a Dark House from my deck. The utility of being able to just pull stuff from deck, pulling out Plokies because that's just an efficient way of getting it into play at instant speed without having it in hand. So
yeah, that was kind of a counterpoint to your argument. If I may, I think I came in halfway through, but I got the point where you said an Alter deck is like bringing out the more classical set 3 variants of the deck. Is that what I? All right.
Yeah.
I would say that an Alter deck is any deck that is good that plays Alter, and the deck that you described is just a bad deck. So that's where I'm at as far as Alter decks. I think anything playing Alter right now just has to be doing Athenia, Perfect Loki nonsense. Like that is like yes, it's not the traditional Alter deck, but like that is what Alter decks are today. And the Athenia stuff is just like it's a relic of a time long past. And like,
well, I think there's a piece to what we're talking about with the Alter. I think you guys speak to it very heavily. Is the old school Alter style of stuff that you're talking about. We were in a format where there weren't a ton of tempo cards. Like there just weren't a ton of tempo cards out there. And so Alter at the time had a lot of free reign to just set up for whatever you wanted. You had a lot of this you just kind of like the idea of like you just stick an Alter and sit on it until you like needed it, and then you just like hard punished. Right now, I think the format is such that you can't really play Alter that way. I think unless you're like a dedicated hard control deck, like the way you're describing it, Derrick, is like you were using Alter as kind of this like control path. He's trying to go get his pizza because he's been waiting 2 hours for it. But it's this idea of his Alter deck was a very like hard control deck, and that was what bought him the time to be able to let Alter do Alter things. In the past, Alter was this kind of like value town deck. You do what you got to do, Derrick. Alter was this kind of like value town deck, and then eventually got to this point where it like just stuck Alters, and then you just were like, well, crap. I think Alter now. And I think that's why people were so concerned when we saw things like Rook Egg, when we saw things like Guinevere, when we saw those things get printed. People started to get really concerned because they were like, oh, great. Now we're giving Alter more ways to draw cards, more ways to be more consistent, more things that they want to sack to Alter. And it's like, yeah, but if we're playing a tempo game and your turn 2 on an empty board is to slam an Alter, like you're gonna get clapped. Like
you can't
because just can't absolutely do it because there's no value generated from just playing an Alter by itself.
Right. So I will like there's basically been 3 different Alter formats, right? And they've gotten progressively worse as time has gone on. The first Alter format was when the set that Alter and Layla came out, and it was just set 3. You played Athenias, you played big guys. The best decks at the time were like Keurig, Hanzo, Quick Cast, and then Gil, I think, was the big top dog that everyone was afraid of.
Right.
And I think the reason that like Gil kind of preyed on the Alter decks was because you had obviously the Laureate. Laureate was the hardest counter at the time to Alter, and pretty much the only counter. But then Gil also got to play counter spells. Even though it was playing them for 3, it was still playing counter spells, which let you have more answers for like the Athenias and stuff. Because at the time, like you needed to lorite the altar, but there were so many other things you had to lorite that you just like actually couldn't lorite enough things. Not only did Gil have like more than 4 copies of lorite because of all the spirit magic, but you also had like Winds of Salvation. And then come set 4, all the green-white decks get another counterspell in the form of Kaguya, and suddenly Altar drops dramatically because now Kaguya gets to counter other things. You have Chant of Tranquility and Bastet to recur your lorites. So now all the green Divinity decks get to play multiple lorites, and Altar goes down in value because of that. Now we lose a lorite. You think Altar is going to go up in value, and I do kind of agree with you that it has not gone up as much as I thought it would. But it's because you have stuff like Seal of Lenneth and honestly like more just entity removal at a cheap cost to force the Altar to be proactive instead of reactive. Where like last round we didn't have that at all. It was always just like, okay, I counter what the Altar is trying to do by having so many lorites you can't keep up. Now it's like, okay, force the Altar, you get something suboptimal, then I deal with what comes out of the Altar at a proactive pace. And I think that's really where Altar is getting punished right now, whereas it wasn't in set 3 or 4 last format.
Yeah, and I think you speak to that. The topic that I wanted to talk about is, you know, when you're thinking about looking at card analysis, like you're looking at a card, so much of your valuing of a card is based on the meta that you're currently living in and the current accessibility, right? So we kind of live in this magical dream fairy tale land. But I think the thing that's important to note, the lesson that we can take away from this is that just because in the current meta an introduced card seems great, doesn't mean that when you actually get into the new meta, it's actually going to be there. Like, I'd like to talk about how before now, Altar decks had 2 primary edition hate cards they had to deal with. And that was if the white deck was playing Dispel and Messenger of the Sun.
Yep.
Like, like that's it. Like, that was literally it. So they just got to sit there forever. Now, they have Sacred Waveblade, Seal of Lenneth,
Raise and Revive.
Dispel, Raise and Revive. Like, there are a bunch of things that are quick cast, efficient on will, and potentially get you even better value that Altar decks now have to think about in a lot of different decks. And it's like that's, I think, the thing to think about is the concept of the word entity. Right, and really recognizing what entity truly means, I think eluded all of us, and I think that we're learning that it really has impacted, and kind of some people are just kind of stuck left at the altar, right? They're just like, why isn't this good? Why am I not where I want to be? Why are the people not here with me? And but there's a lesson to be learned there. I think the same vein of like and I can speak from my experience this weekend, Gwyber. Right? We saw Gwyber and we went, oh man, you can turn 1 energized Dark Alice, play a 1-drop, play a Gwyber. That feels so great. Until they Sight of the Light of the Sacred Spirit it for 1, and then you feel super bad. Like we all looked at Gwyber and we said, oh man, it's back. It's gonna be so great. And then it's just not. Like it's I was playing 4 Gwyber Ryan credit for the list, the initial list.
This is team effort.
So we were playing 4 Gwyber in this Atom list that I used to win the event. When Gwyber felt good, I was already winning the game. And it was like, yeah, this feels great because this is just like the game's over at this point. The other 97% of the time, Gwyber felt real clunky and real bad. Like, have you ever had to hard cast a Gwyber for 5 only for it to be answered by a 2-drop? I have. Like that feels real bad. And it's not like I was losing. It's not like I was losing that game. It was just kind of like, I guess I'm just paying full cost for Gwyber right now, you know?
Yeah.
And I think another similar thing is like Guinevere, right? Guinevere is good. Like, I don't think anyone will ever attest that it ever feels bad to play a Guinevere. However, Guinevere does not feel like the god card that she was back in the day. Because there's also just not as much reliance on the graveyard right now. There just isn't.
That is a huge one, yeah, for sure.
There's just, like, discard is okay, but back before this, discard was everything. Like being able to set up your graveyard for like, you know, things like the command of life and death and there was just so much interaction with the graveyard in so many different ways that we thought that we saw Guinevere. You were like, wait, you're giving these discard decks red, not having to play white for Dark Alice. the ability to start setting up these ridiculous combo plays with their graveyard, and then we went, oh yeah, wait, they just don't have as much graveyard interaction anymore. And so again, we just kind of like, we were applying old meta logic to new meta cards without actually taking into consideration the full new meta. And it's, I think, an important lesson for all of us, you know? Like,
yeah, I definitely think that one like humongous factor for old school Guinevere that doesn't apply now is just how good Death Scythe was. And like Death Scythe was a card you just like put in your deck because you didn't want to get hosed by whatever J rule or nonsense was out there. But like when you had it with Guinevere, because your graveyard was so like for the most part useless, like Guinevere would just draw 2, like, and that was just super good, and like that was like a huge factor why she was so good. And I think like Guinevere will withstand like the retrial of time. I think that like as we get more sets and more dual stones, Guinevere will stand out as a very powerful card once again. But I do have to say that I think Gwyber has kind of fallen to the wayside, and I think like when I was thinking about Gwyber and evaluating Gwyber in this format, I was thinking back to the old school decks, and what made Gwyber so good was that there wasn't really efficient answers for him at the same cost as Gwyber. And I still stand by it. There's not now, because back then, like the first time Gwyber really got checked was with Bear Magic, and like Gwyber was still good even when Bear Magic was a card. And I'm looking at Light of Raisin Revive. I'm looking at the white blue sword art that exiles a guy that I can't remember the name of. I'm looking at Light of Raisin Revive, and it's like, okay, I mean, not Light of Sacred Spirit. So Light of Raisin Revive, -1 mana. The white blue one, -1. Light of Sacred Spirit, it answers it, but it's situational. Like you don't want to just main deck that card unless you're like expecting Gwyber or okay, Derrick's already had his little tirade on Discord or Facebook or whatever about why that card is main boardable. But I don't think enough. Like, I do think it's good. I think it's probably worth main decking. But like going into this weekend, right? This event, this like sequels of event, it doesn't really do much against Alter Deck. It's great against Adam, it's great against Gwyber, it's pretty good against Melgus, whatever. But like, I'm like, okay, that's like your one answer. You can't main deck as many copies of that card as I can Gwyber. So I think that like Gwyber should still be edging out in terms of tempo. But what really happened was that like the actual difficulty of playing Gwyber is a lot more stringent than I thought it would be, because absolutely. 1-drops die a lot easier when like Percival's in the format or when Perfect Loki's in the format. So it's actually so much harder to get Gwyber online than I thought it would be.
Or instant speed Flame King shout with like Awakening.
Yeah, like all of these things just like make Gwyber like when Gwyber comes out and people answer him, that doesn't feel bad. But just the act of getting him on the board is so much more difficult than I thought it would be, that I do think that that's only going to get worse as time goes on. So I think Gwyber definitely fails the test of time, but I do think Guinevere actually will get better. I think that
I agree.
The draw to discard is just going to get better the more we see more graveyard or things that want to be in the graveyard. So
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely an interesting dichotomy between the two cards.
Yeah.
I think right now the biggest trick is with this meta is, and you and I spoke about this, Ryan, in person, is that currently the nice thing about this meta is that like there are very clearly some big dogs on campus, but there is absolutely no deck that is perfectly safe. Like every deck has. I think
Adam is insane.
Okay, I'll give you it's insane.
Having played Adam this weekend, and I can attest that like our version of Adam, like the only time yesterday or the only time Saturday that I felt bad was when the deck was just like sputtering to get started. Like,
right.
I think there were some games where I just like. Both games in the match, I just turned to Zalist, or like I turned to Dark Alist into Adam Sykart and Grave, and I was like, "You don't have any graveyard hate. This is great. Like I'm just gonna train wreck for the rest of this match." But there was another game where I was just like, "Well, I guess I'm playing this stalled game with like with all these kind of things to just kind of draw into an Adam as fast as possible."
And that's where Guinevere gets insane too. But that's my other tangent. Yeah,
for sure.
Like absolutely. I've been thinking, like I talked with Dennis from Europe a couple times about like just the Adam deck, and I'm like he's kind of been skeptical about Guinevere in the list, and I've been kind of thinking about it a little bit. Like, is Guinevere, if we're not playing Gwyber anymore, like does Guinevere still merit a slot? But I think those late game scenarios where it's like, here's my 1-drop that you now need to answer, because if you try to answer anything else, I just sack it to Guinevere and draw more cards and get more answers than you. So I think like that's another place where she shines, and just like it does fuel the late game of the deck.
Yeah.
Even beyond that, like though, like even if like sometimes you'll find yourself like just stuck with the Adam in hand and you just don't have the Dark Alist. Like if you have like the red source, like just play the Guinevere, like you play another 1-drop. sack off the 1-drop or whatever, and then discard the Atom, and now you have Zealous online, and that's just perfectly fine.
The other thing is too is that deck, of all the decks, Atom is probably the one that interacts with the graveyard the most, to be perfectly honest. Not even just in the form of like trying to get Atom to grave, but Misty Woods is like absolutely a powerhouse. Misty Woods is absolutely a powerhouse of a card, and I don't think people are really respecting it as much as, or like maybe they're not really thinking about just how many implications that card has. So it's the idea of, one, it genuinely replaces itself pretty much every time, especially since we're playing 4 Alice, 4 Atom, 4 Dark Alice, 3 Kagi at this point, right? So we're playing 15 cards. Over a third of our deck is Fairy Tail. We're probably going to hit a Fairy Tail off of it. So that's already there. Secondly, its revive effect is 2 colorless. So it literally can come on off of anything. And then 2, you have the fact that we have such a heavy discard engine. We have 8 cards in our hand that say discard, like at instance, like in some form of.
Don't forget, they say draw 2 cards and then discard.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason why Guinevere is really good.
Right. So that's the other thing too. Is like they're all draw/discard. So like I had some games before where I was sitting on a Kaguya in hand when I didn't have a Dark Alice on live, but I had Guinevere on live. And earlier in the match, I had played the Misty Woods, and I had been sitting on that Kaguya for a while. Like, the Kaguya was not what I grabbed off the Misty Woods. And my opponent made a play, and I was like, cool. In response to that, sack Guinevere to herself, draw, discard Kaguya, immediately reanimate Kaguya, cancel the spell. Like...
And it makes that like so hard to play around because like you're looking at your opponent and like they've got like white, blue open, and they don't even have a red source for like a potential Izanami, and you're just like, make this game-winning play, and you're like, cool, flash in Dark Alice, like, and now I have perfect mana to play Kaguya, and you're like, well, that was silly, and then they're like, oh, you don't have like you don't have a Misty, or even Misty was on field in a Guinevere, like you could just have 2 mana Kaguya. Like, there's just so many instances where like Kaguya comes out of nowhere when she's supposed to cost white-green, and they're just like,
I was playing against Patrick. I think I was playing against Patrick in finals, and he goes to make a play with Raise and Revive to bring back an Isis that I had removed. And I was like, I don't really have an answer to that. I have an Erendite in hand to stop it, and I have 3 will available, and I have a Guinevere on board. I was like, this puts him down to 1 will to just cast it. Let's try this. And so I sack the Guinevere to itself, and the second card I drew off of the Guinevere was a Kaguya. And I was just like, oh, cool, sweet. Just discard it, reanimate, cancel the Raise and Revive, and then we Gucci. Like,
how bad does that feel if your opponent like Look of Corruptions you, sees no counter spell, so like this is my time, and you're just like, actually Guinevere, and they're just like, what do I do? Like, you just have counter spells and you have no counter spells. It's pretty dumb.
Right. And so like I have to do more playtesting with the Atom. However, even as someone who's playtested it, I definitely think there are things out there that can be used to counter it. You just have to, like, it just exists there. Like, I do want to play against. I'm not sure how necessarily.
No, Derek's deck is terrible. Don't listen
Cal's
to
deck
Derrick.
versus, like, I know that you played against Cal, but his report from the tournament, Derrick, was that his luck was shit all day. So
I'll admit that both our opening hands were complete garbage. Like, it was just like, imagine like the worst possible draws, and like we probably both drew them. But like, I think like in a sense of like my nut hand versus his nut hand, since that deck isn't playing Raise and Revive, once I RFG all of your Zealouses, what do?
Well, we play Raise and Revives now, so it's fine.
So against you, okay.
No. Like he was only side decking them. Like, I gave Jeremy and Derek both the same deck, and then like I kind of let them both like figure out their own sideboards, and like they would ask me a question, I'd be like, this card, and I just went back to my Melgus deck that I was slowly trying to figure out. But I guess like back to the point of like what beats Atom, and I do think like Alter is a consideration, but I don't think Brunhild's the way. Like, I think like Blade of Faith is the card. I don't think Odin's Judgment is, like, once we take out the Guibers, right? Once you take out the Guibers, you take out the Alcil Scouts, you put in more Kaguyas, more Light of Raise and Revive, some more interaction, more Zealous threat, and like build a good deck instead of a mostly good deck. I think that you are like pretty favored against like just things that want to remove your Zealous. I talked after I posted in the Facebook group about the Melgus deck. Gianluca Di Clemente, or Deacle as you may know him from Europe, messaged me and was like, hey, I've also missing on Melgus, like here's my thoughts, like what do you think? And like taking my deck, I would probably cut like one of the opening the red eyes and like some of the fluff and play Athenia's Love. That was something he recommended, just to like beat Perfect Loki. Because then you can like before untap, like in response for Loki, play Athenia's Love, and then like they just can't do anything about your judgment. You can just deal all that damage in one turn, and it's also a good answer for the Zalus. So I think that's like a little bit of a hedge for both matchups. So I think that's cool. But then we talked for a little bit, and like I think there is a bit of a triangle going on at the top. How many times have we spent roller school episodes talking about
triangles?
Yeah. So the main reason I think that Loki is like the quintessential altar deck is halfway because of Perfect Loki as the J ruler, but Return of God is just insane. Like it's just 2-mana Athenia 9 times out of 10, and Athenia really puts a lot of pressure on like everything. And I think that like Perfect Loki is still gonna lose overall to Melgus, especially once you put in the Athenia's Love and you have a bit more answers to Perfect Loki specifically. But like the Return of God makes the Adam deck have a very difficult time. And I think over in Europe, there's a lot more players playing Perfect Loki and playing it optimally, whereas in America, we're just brain dead aggro players for the most part, and we're also intelligent aggro players. We're mostly brain dead aggro players, and then there are some intelligent aggro players, but for the most part, we're aggro players, right?
We played Carrick for so long.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
like,
I don't understand.
So does Germany, to be fair. Like Germany's probably still out there playing Melgus, but Italy and Spain, like Spain is, in my opinion, the most terrifying region. By the way, in case anyone wants to know, the Spanish players are terrifying. But like they like to play Gil, and I think they're going to transition very easily into Adam and Perfect Loki. I think Melgus still has a decentish time against Perfect Loki, and that's kind of where the triangle is. But I think like Melgus's Perfect Loki matchup is the weekend of that triangle, where Perfect Loki will beat that about 40% of the time, whereas like Adam is beating Melgus 80% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beating Adam probably 70% of the time.
And I think it comes down to the point of also, again, moving out of speaking to this idea of leaving the old ideas behind, is like, we even had this conversation earlier today. I was talking with someone and they were like, isn't just the way isn't the Adam deck just green, white, blue, and then isn't it just doing this, and you just want, like, there's so much Sandstorm in the format. I'm like, one, there's no Sandstorm in the format anywhere.
No Sandstorm.
Two, like,
there's
Adam,
that's
he's
it.
like, you just want to get. I was like, you want to get turn 2 Kaguya online as fast as possible, and I'm like, I don't really. Like, I absolutely don't care about turboing out to Rune 2, and I think that was one of the things that people were worried about with Adam versus Melgus at first, was like, we're going to try to turn out, they're going to just try to get out Kaguya super fast, and we're already going to have too many things on board. And I'm like, yeah, Adam doesn't really care about turn 2 Kaguya, so Adam just has casually 1,800 life sitting in their rune deck. Like as a Melgus deck, it's going to be real difficult to kill your opponent at 5,800 life if they just like get any kind of a solid start.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. You're playing Genshi Tenchon and trying to burn shit for a bunch more damage. Like, I get it. I understand it.
I did absolutely hate your Genshi Tenchon Melgus deck, but I was actually very happy that our Stranger decks were identical after I played this weekend. Oh yeah. So I was playing 2 Chucha lanes, and that was just absolutely. I swear to God,
you hit it. You're like, why am I playing?
No. I don't even think so. Like, yes, I hit it and I felt bad, but I think over the course of the event, I must have pulled, let's see, there were 4 rounds and then 1 round of top 8. And I think I 2-0'd most. No, I 2-1'd twice. So that's 8 plus 2 plus 2 games, which is 12 games, which is approximately between 12 and 20 Levatines. And I swear to God, I Stranger like Levatined into Chooch Lane 15 out of 20 times or something disgusting.
Both of our games in top 4, Ryan only got 1 Stranger, and the first Stranger both time was Chooch Lane, and I was like, that's real bad for you.
Like, I'm not like, I know, like, there's seeing him and feeling bad about it, and then there's seeing him a lot, and then there's like, literally, why is this always my Stranger? Like, am I shuffling my Stranger deck? It was that bad. So I'm like absolutely cutting one with this guy.
This is why I'm telling you people that the idea of shuffling and just pulling off your Stranger from the top is a bad idea for using Strangers.
Like, I let my opponent pick, and it's
I shuffle it. So let's speak to this. I shuffle it, I fan it out, and I roll a 10-sider. I let my opponent roll a 10-sider. Like I give every single one of those cards in my 10 cards has an equal chance of being chosen every single time I get a stranger chosen. Like you don't. Ryan, take that lesson to heart, buddy.
Mathematically, if you shuffle your stranger deck in a random fashion, every single stranger.
But then your order is predetermined. For the rest of the game.
It is still random. It is still random. Random is random. There's no like predetermined different random.
But yeah, the reason why I decided that I wanted to put in a second red wizard was mainly because it
wasn't Kukulin. Like
that, but like the feeling of just Awakening the Flame King, dealing 4 to my opponent's board, and then just having to put in like a red wizard, and then just like ended up dealing 10 to my opponent's board. I was just like, this feels actually fine.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, yeah, all right, we're doing this. We're adding a second one.
Yeah, I felt like Red Wizard was like one of the guys I didn't want to see 2 of, and it was something that was like good early, but it just didn't feel like. I felt like Ku Chilean felt better like flipping into in Melgus Mirrors. And I thought I would see like there was like I know like I'm going to an event. It's in America. I'm going to see Melgus. I'm going to see Isis. And I played against Melgus round 1. I played against Isis round 2. I played against Patrick at some point. But like even then, my life total was just so high all the time that it didn't even matter. And I was like, why am I playing this card? So yeah.
Also, the fact that it kills Dark Elves. That was another reason I was just like, you know what?
This
might be
of all the strangers. So to be honest,
Like
as the Adam deck. As the Adam deck, the stranger that I hated the most to see from a Melgus deck was Red Wizard. Any other stranger come down, I'm like, Regulus comes down, I'm like, cool, I'll take 10. I'm never going to attack it, and you're never going to be able to kill me because my life total's too high. Yep. And then it's like, Chuchulain, yeah, that's fine. Shade, I have a bajillion 1-drops. Like, that's fine. Like, I'm going to have stuff to be able to survive, or I'll bring it back with Misty Woods, and then you'll cry. But like, Red Wizard comes down, and I'm like, oh! There's 2 Acolytes in the Sun, a Dark Alice, a Guinevere, and an Alice's little scout, all gone.
Yep, that's kind of how it goes. So Alter.
Yeah, let's go back to Alter.
I
think this discussion is the sense of like the thing that I want to kind of bring about it is you should never like assume you know what like the place of a card is going to be in a new meta just by seeing the card, because I think that things this weekend that I thought in looking at them were going to be super relevant, cough Regalia break meant absolutely nothing. Meant absolutely nothing right now. So like, and Ryan and I agreed. Like I think Ryan and I beforehand were like, oh yeah, 3 Regalia break in the sideboard, like you just have it. And then we were playing and we're like, wow, this card actually feels real bad. Like I don't even even having it, I'd rather you just like keep that Regalia on board. And sure, that's matchup dependent, like being the Adam deck. Adam doesn't really care how many stranger triggers you get because we're probably just gonna have an answer whenever you play the stranger or whatever your triggers are. Like it's just like that's how Adam operates. The other thing too is like even the idea of killing a J ruler as the Adam deck, I ignored it. Like, I had an opportunity to kill his Melgus when we were playing in top 4, and I was just like, I think I just dome you in the face. Like, I think I just let Melgus be on the front side, because now that you've wasted his God Art, he's just a 10-10. Like, I don't need you getting extra. I don't
it's
need
the
I was going to ask if he had God Arted yet.
Yeah, like he had God Arted.
It's like, yeah.
Once Priscia, like the Priscia conundrum. Like, if you survive Priscia God Arted, there's like actually justification to just letting it stay on its J ruler side, because then it's like, well, do you want to go for damage or do you want to get a stone? Like, you can't do both.
Yeah. My Melgus line was like, I flipped Melgus, I hit Red Wizard, he had 2 Zaluses, and like, I guess I'm God Arting and like rolling the dice to try and find shade. Oh, we didn't hit it? I guess we die. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm just, there's nothing we can do. But yeah, I don't think that Melgus has like any chance against, like, it's got some chance against Alice. I think if I actually side Burial Rites, step 1 maybe helps. Step 2, play Athena's Love main board, probably helps too. Just like more banish stuff to try and deal with it. Light of Raisin Revive is like an argument, but I don't think it's worth.
Play white.
I don't think it's worth going that heavy in white. I think turn 2 Levitine is just way too good against everything else.
Isn't 2 whites not just enough
to play Light of Raisin Revive? Absolutely not. I don't think so.
Not for Melgus, I don't
I
think
think
so.
the games.
Really?
I think if he like Yokai Festivals me and I don't immediately have Raisin Revive, I'm never winning
Oh,
that game.
okay, in that sense. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
to
sorry.
speak,
Yeah,
yeah, like in this
yeah.
scenario, like let's put
I
it
thought
this
you
way.
meant just like
So we
running
were
it in
playing.
general. I was like, that's
So
Yeah.
Ryan had gone 4-0 in Swiss.
Like I said.
Ryan had gone
Yeah.
4-0 in Swiss, and then we got paired up because I was 4th seed because we cut the top 4. So we play against Ryan. Ryan's choosing to go in the play. Is Melgus. He doesn't see Percy turn 1. I stick turn 1 Acolyte of the Sun. He doesn't see Percy turn 2. I turn 2 Yokai Festival, and Ryan immediately scooped.
I was like, do I beat that? No.
It sounds like you just got.
Yeah. Like I could have played it differently. Like I could have Leviton as Acolyte, or I could have like done things differently. But like honestly, like Personal Turn 1 makes that way easier, and then I just like completely forgot about turn to Yokai, and I was like,
So you went. So you went first. You turned to Levitine, and then
he
I didn't kill his Acolyte.
He turned to
And then
Leviton for Stranger in the 7-1.
Yeah.
Did you have Awakening the Flame King in hand?
No.
Okay, never
Well, I
mind.
couldn't play it on turn 2 anyway.
Did you have Shakti?
It's my turn 2. I don't have coin.
Right. No, that's fine. But like next turn, like you will.
No.
Okay. Did you draw first?
So I went first, and I played Guinevere, and he played Acolyte with Energize.
Yep.
Like he has Energize, but he plays Acolyte.
Yep.
I go turn to Leviton 7-1, draw Kukulane as my stranger, of course.
Naturally.
And I go pass. And I'm like, I have Bloody Break for this Dark Alice. And I just forgot he could Yokai. And he went, so Acolyte, play Dark Alice, draw 2, discard 2, untap, white, Energize, stone, Yokai Festival. Because he discarded Dark Alice. Like I should have Bloody Breaked his Dark Alice, but I just didn't think about it. And I don't
never mind. The fact that he has two other things on board anyways makes the play that I was thinking about irrelevant.
What were you thinking about? Like just dealing, like I should have just dealt 5 to the Acolyte, but
Shakti and Awakening the Flame King make him banish 2 dudes, but he has two like.
So I only have 2
on
mana.
board.
He only has 2 will.
Past turn, when turn goes back to you, you untap, you call a stone, you'll have 3.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but then I have Devil's Alice on board at this point.
Yeah, he's already at 60 life. Like I don't think I'm winning that game.
Never mind. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like you scooped it up. It doesn't matter.
I see what you're saying. I was like, once he's at 60 life, I'm conceding. I'm not even like worried about like dealing with his Alice.
Like get you 10 cents, you could have gotten there.
All right, I have a bid for next week's episode. How to tell your friend they've gone too far down the rabbit hole. Just like a mediation, like
the intervention.
Yeah, too many people still playing Force of Will are just very eccentric about very specific ideas. Derrick is not one of them. Derrick just generally has very eccentric ideas. But most people out there that are still beautiful people playing Force of Will are just like, yeah, I'm still playing because I really like playing the game in this fashion. And sometimes you just say, hey, man, there are other ways to play the game.
There are other ways to play. Yeah,
Gary Becker, you don't have to play aggro every format. You don't have to do it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, as people are shifting in this meta, like into this meta, and then also as we get newer and newer sets, especially when we get the idea of more and more dual stones come out, I think it's going to be really important for players who are doing the testing, who are wanting to, get ready for whatever the season ends up being, even the Bite Ramen events or anything else, is like when we're seeing spoilers, don't deck build when you're building spoilers. Like just absolutely don't do it. Like
that's the best part.
I understand.
But you wait till the end.
But wait until you have all the cards and then start deck building and then start testing. And I think one of the other things too is talking about continual value and modal value. I think those are the two things that I think are super important. So alter decks or alter back beforehand in old formats had both modal value and continued value, in the sense that the longer it sits on the board, the more value it generated. And then also it had this like utility value of like it could get you kind of whatever you wanted, right? So I think the thing is, yes, Alter right now has modal value in the sense that you get selection and kind of some utility pieces, but I don't think it has the chance to have that continual value that it used to. Because again, when you first play an Alter, that shit don't do anything. Like that card does absolutely nothing. Guinevere has a lot of like continued value, like the longer she sits on board, the better. But she's lost a lot of her modal value because there's not as much stuff that's relying on the graveyard. So like you lose both of those things. Raise and Revive is a card that has good modes. Light of the Sacred Spirit is a card that has good, decent modes. What are some other things that I'm thinking of?
I already disagree with both things you said. I don't think I think Light of Raise and Revive has one good mode. So carry on.
All right,
it's based on the I think it's based on the deck. I think it's based on the deck. I
agree. I think that if you're playing a deck with Raise and Revive where you don't just revive with Rage Up every time, you're playing a bad deck. So I mean, yeah, I think it does based on the deck.
Wow.
It's one of the other reasons too why I'm not sold on Izanami right now. But also like it's a good card. Don't get me wrong. And I'll say this way, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily absolutely like my opinion is law or anything else. I want to look into it because right now, at least for Adam, like, and that's the deck that I can speak to the most experience with. So like, no lying there about the bias.
Yeah, no, sure.
Three will is a lot for Adam to spend. Like there was a lot of the times that the Adam deck feels really comfortable sitting at 2 will, like making the play on my turn, leaving 2 will up. Like that's a lot of what the Adam deck feels comfortable doing. 3 will feels like a lot. Now ISIS has will for days if they get ISIS online. So yeah, Izanami makes a ton of sense. And like I'm not entirely sure how like Ploki decks would make use of ISIS. I get why people are like Izanami so you can reanimate Ploki, and I'm like
I see what you're saying.
You just get back Xenia too.
Yeah,
like there's really. I think that Izanami is not like a 4 of, and it's not like it's just something you throw in those mid-range decks. I think that as Adam and Perfect Loki kind of rise in popularity because I think those two are the best decks by far. I think that an uncounterable Kaguya, because you Izanami it from graveyard, is going to feel insane. I think that uncounterable like Perfect Lokis are going to feel insane. Like the fact that there's no Lori to stop the Izanami, like as much as 3 mana instant speed feels bad, like the grindy, those matchups, and because of how much life the Adam deck gains, like they're going to get grindy. The mirror is going to get grindy. I think like the higher value, more expensive cards will actually go up in value. Like you will actually, in my opinion, start like siding into Motoko in the Adam deck for the mirror because you're both going to gain 1 billion life. You both can't permanently kill each other's Alices. Like you're going to need to do it. So like I definitely agree. Like where we are right now, while we're still like feeling out where everything is, like Izanami's a little bit just too expensive, just not really worth it. But like in the vision I have for the future, like that's gonna change soon. Yeah. So
I was actually gonna reach out to you guys about a potential deck with Izanami and Kaguya's.
Well, I think
whether or not it ends up being like Hanzo or whatever, but like
I think letting go of Guibers gives. I think letting go of the Guiber engine gives Adam more of an opportunity to explore with that idea of like having more will open because we're not just like so dedicated to playing 1-drops all the time. But again,
I know Kel was on this plan actually.
Even on that concept, I think that this is a format where quick adjustments and quick abandoning of ideas to like make those adjustments is what's going to help people find the best versions of the best decks. Like in the car ride home from Chicago, Ryan and I were like, yeah, I think we just pull out 8 cards. And both of us were just like in complete agreement on that. And I was like, I just won the event with this deck, and I'm already like 8 of those cards need to go.
I think what you're forgetting though is the most important takeaway from the car ride home from Chicago, which is the super secret Adam deck that plays Karmic Retribution or Karmic. What is it? Karmic Dispersal.
Karmic Retribution.
Yeah, Karmic Retribution. You just
play the stupidest
like
deck ever.
4 of each giant, like 4 Mystery Box, 4 Dark Alice, 4 Adam, and then you just Karmic Retribution your own dude before untap, and then untap Zeus, Light of Theranos your own guy, and you just kill people on turn 3. This is the best deck of the format. Don't tell anyone. Don't let Jeremy mute me in chat. Don't let anything happen. If he mutes me right now, he's trying to.
I didn't mute Ryan. He muted himself. Ryan
You're being
muted himself.
censored here on Middle School. I don't know what you're talking about. It's an absolute
Ryan
lie.
muted himself there. So yeah, we have this like. So to speak to this, it's this joke idea of you just play all these cards that are 7 cost or higher. You play Dark Alice so that you can draw into those things to make sure your hand is filtered, and then you play a 1-drop that has barrier like
Shadow of Chronos.
Shadow of Chronos.
Because we play War
And
like
then you're just like,
yep.
and you're just like, cool. Turn 3, I have 2 will and upkeep. Karmic Reversal, Shadow of Chronos, Light of Chronos. Pitch 40 damage worth of cards, kill your opponent.
That's like the cheese way to win the deck, but it's also just like good if you don't die. Like you have like white, blue, and red stones, so you get to play white giant, blue giant, and red giant, and just inheritance them. And then on turn 7, you've got like Mystery Box, and you've got Makoto, and you've got like just a whole bunch of not like you just actually.
How we get to turn 7?
We're just inheriting giants. Like you die to Melgus every time. That's why your Melgus plane is
okay.
Karmic
Making
Retribution.
sure.
Your Melgus plane is like Karmic Retribution into like Light of Kyranos, but then like the deck is just like not bad outside of that. So
yeah.
So
we might try to build it on the channel sometime,
Thanks.
and then like
yeah. I'm waiting for Jason to get back to me on how his event goes. So
yeah, we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Beware of cats. Beware of Schrodinger cats.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't respect
No,
that
like okay, well you're gonna probably get
I
cats. I
respect
didn't respect it either. And then I was just like, okay, this just happened.
Sometimes in this, and that's I think one of the like unexpected takeaways.
You
from
play
this meta.
Logan's Judgment. How do you lose to that deck?
I think
He was playing Hanzo.
Oh.
He was smart.
Oh.
He was a smart man.
They know that Hanzo. They know that combo decks are just best decks if they're Hanzo.
yeah,
that's
right,
terrifying.
absolutely. So I think that's one of the unexpected takeaways from this meta, at least from what I've seen from Minneapolis, from what I saw from our events, and from what like the discussions online have been from like different like competitive players, is that there is still enough silly wiggle room in the format that like there's a lot of stuff that you have to respect because it can just be good. And I think it's been a long time since we've had more than one like rogue sleeper deck that people have to respect, right? Like for the longest time it was just like meta IU. Right? Or
God,
like
don't tell me about IU.
or like
World
meta
is still got me reeling.
Kirik. Now we have meta Kyranos turn 3, cat deck, Hanzo combo decks, like all these other things, and it's just like, okay, I'm about it. I'm about this life. And let me just say, this is probably some of the most fun I've had playing Force of Will in a bit, and I love this game all the bit, but also like it has been super fun, like goofing around and experimenting with everything else. These guys had me in stitches talking about this friggin' Light of Kyranos deck. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe. Oh, wait a minute, maybe. Maybe. Like friggin' oh yes, also turbo Makoto flips, like stuff like that. Like sometimes that's just good and you have to respect it. But is it meta? Probably not. Don't tell JPK that. JPK thinks turn 2 Makoto.
Does he think it's still insane? Like I've kind of come off it. I think enough of the spooky decks like have just ways to answer it.
I think I don't know if I convinced him, but when my response to his questioning of my deck from the Vite Ramen event was, what about turn 2 Makoto? And my response was, well, you're not being interactive, so I probably just respond with double Zalus and kill it. And he was like, oh yeah,
but if they're Hanzo, what do you do?
Like, yeah, that's fair.
And you still like just one Dallas gets the job done, so it's like it's fine. So.
What?
It's like
one Dallas just blocks it.
I have Eternal.
Oh, block
so, like,
it. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I have Eternal.
You gain a bunch of life, you gain a bunch of life, but then you're like, yeah.
No, sorry.
The other
I
thing is too,
I was
can always
kill
just
it. I was like, no.
You can always just crash your 1-drops into it too, and then I still have a Zalus.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. No. Sorry,
I
misunderstood.
Like the deck is again, you have to respect it, but it's not like the meta. But
they're also
cool.
never killing your Guinevere, so you get to like just throw any 1-drop you want under the bus and draw more Zalus, and then once you see 2 Zalus, every Makoto is dead.
Yeah.
And the only way they're killing your Zalus is with 10 counters on Lancelot, but you run Erendite Kaguya, so like.
Good luck.
Yeah.
So, all in all, super fun format. I can't wait to see what kind of crazy things people come up with. But at the same time, don't be too committed to your crazy ideas or even the deck that you took to a tournament and had success with, because otherwise you just might get left for something better, and then you're just stuck at the altar looking like a fool.
I'm pretty sure my Brunhild's one trick now. It's been confirmed.
If it looks like a deck, it talks like a deck, and it plays like a deck, it's Derrick playing Brunhild.
It's probably a stemma.
Name a
And it's
more
probably a
iconic
stemma.
duo. Okay. Which is the more iconic duo? Is it Derrick playing Brunhild or me playing Hanzo? Which is the
Me playing a stemma. Get out of here.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Brunhild. It's Derrick and a stemma, I think.
It's just a stemma. I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.
a Brunhild. I don't know about that.
I mean, yeah, you're probably right.
Someone had a quick. I mean, we have a few minutes left, so someone's talking about. Wondered if we had a question of the small card pool. Someone said going to talk about the small pool of cards, and I will say that yes, there is a small pool of cards. However, I also think that there's a lot of really good stuff
There's a
all
lot
over
of
the
playable.
board. There's a lot of playable stuff. Like the
Yeah.
ratio of like playable to non-playable is like surprisingly high by comparison to other formats. So
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can play and like there's also not a ton of overlap between like the like primary decks. Like Perfect Loki and Adam are both playing Dallas, right? And like Adam experiments into Perfect Lokis because sometimes
Probably
boards
Perfect
get
Loki.
wide. Like sometimes boards get wide and you need to clear it, right? But like there's not a ton of overlap beyond that, and like
Maybe
Melgus and Adam have like 0 cards in common outside of Guinevere. The Machine Makoto deck, and like I can't think of any other deck that shares that same kind of concept with that deck. Like there is a lot of things, different good things that can be built with only a little bit of overlap, which I think is nice. It's definitely not reflect. It's definitely not reflect refrain the same deck 8 times.
Reflect Refrain was like 7 different decks showed up. Like had this conversation today because I posted in the Wanderer group. Okay, I want to pose this question to you if we're closing out the show. But
Sure.
Everything in Wanderer is unbanned. What is the best deck? You get Yigdor combo. You get Cheshire. I disagree. I think a lot of people
I honestly
commented
feel like
this.
just sharing it. I haven't actually thought about it. Like,
I think Reflect Refrain, right? Because I think
Reflect
that
refrain orb.
why?
Yeah.
Are you talking about like with also giving energize?
Yeah, so everything is energized so that you're competitive, but then like you just unban everything. I think that Reflector Frame with Orb, because like okay, Sherry is definitely like insane, right? Like you get Ruin Stories, you get infinite value, but where Sherry falls behind, I think, is on tempo, and then Reflector Frame just has a bunch of 0 mana nonsense. Every broken thing that Sherry does still costs mana. So what Reflector Frame does, it gets to cancel spells, it gets to draw more cards. Like I think that Reflector Frame just beats Sherry. And like a lot of people are just like Sherry hands down. And
Maybe
I'm like,
I can see where you're going with it. I think
yeah,
because you also have to imagine that like the amount of cheap cancels that Reflect Refrain would have answer to it with like Lorite, Severing Winds, Otherworld Dreams, get access to both Tamas if we really want it. They'd still get access to Cheshire Cat, like they still get access to some of that stuff to like keep their hand full and then get to their orbs and then blah 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 blah. Like I think there's definitely some merit there.
You have Otherworld Dreams, you have Fair Spell, you have Severing Wind. So like everyone is just playing canceled deck with like some Black Moonbeams to be the J Ruler decks. So I think Reflector Frame gets to like draw extra cards, gets to be orb focused, it gets to, and then because it gets to play the orbs like and get more value off of them, I think it draws more cards, it finds more cancel spells. Eventually it just like plays a Windscled Refuge, it flips, and then it cancels. It gets to aggressively fight over cancel wars with like orb and reflect and refrain, and just like force your opponent to spend more mana on cancel wars than you are, and then you get to win the important cancel war, and then you can win the game. And I think that's what would happen, but that's what I think would be the best. It just beats all the combo.
I think you convinced me only because I forgot that Law of Silence was a card because it's almost banned in everything.
Yeah,
but like the fact that you get to like tutor out Law of Silence and then just counter everything, and then your opponent doesn't get to play the game.
I don't know if you ever spend 4 counters to tutor.
The fact that you had the option to do so,
right?
I think is the point that I was getting.
Yeah.
Like once you get to that point, like if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and like there's also still green divinity decks where you get cheap Kaguya and you get like Forest Meditation. I don't think Forest Meditation can be good with Sherry having EEU, but like that just kind of still forces the point, I think, of Reflect Refrain.
Yeah.
So interesting to think that like out of all of the nonsense we've had over Force Will and like all of the crazy decks,
And
it's
it
just like
comes back to Reflect Refrain.
it's Reflect Refrain, but like with cards that came out after Reflect Refrain, right? So it's Otherworld Dreams, Severing Winds, Fair Spell, just like that kind of stuff. But interesting thing to think about. So it beats like Yigdor combo, Tetra's Cat combo, Tetla Fairy Tale Grim. I think all of that still loses to like cancel Reflect Refrain. Interesting.
Maybe.
Is Cleaning Doll say specifically edition or was it entity?
Edition.
Edition.
Oh, Cleaning Doll specifically says edition.
Yeah,
never mind. Yeah. I was like, maybe like pop the
orbs.
Regalias, but then
I don't think you're resolving 3 mana.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think you can. Like, I was like, the more I thought about it, I was like, it's 3 mana. I don't think that's ever resolving.
There's Fair Spell, Otherworld Dreams, Severing Winds, True Blade.
The more I thought about it, I was like, wait,
Apollo, Lorite, like. There's a lot of nonsense going on.
Yeah, 20 cancels. 20 cancels .deck.
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah.
That is going to do it for us tonight. Great conversation as always, and thank you guys so much in the chat for any questions, and we hope you guys kind of took some lesson from this and apply it to your testing. I know people are having a lot of fun, a lot of different stuff, but it's our hope that to prepare for your next event or anything else, or even just locals, you kind of take this and learn it a little bit, maybe abandon some concepts or be willing to be comfortable changing your deck more than you maybe were before. Again, if you feel like supporting us and you appreciate what we're doing here, go ahead and consider clicking that join button down below or just subscribing to the channel. It always goes to help. Even that way it gets us the YouTube gods like it when we get action on the channel in some way, shape, or form.
I'll give you some action.
Derrick spamming those emotes that you could potentially get access to.
Yes.
But
we need more
until
emotes.
Next time, this has been myself, Jeremy Franklin, and I have been joined by Ryan Miles and Derrick Muguneza. And we'll see you guys next time. So until then, class dismissed. Have a good night, everybody.